I should have known something was wrong when I couldn't keep my breakfast down for the third day in a row. The October morning in Denver was crisp, with golden leaves scattered across our driveway like nature's confetti, but I felt none of the usual joy that autumn brought me. Maybe it's just stress from the promotion, I told my husband Jake as he handed me a cup of ginger tea. His brown eyes were filled with concern, the same look he'd given me when I'd first mentioned the persistent nausea 2 weeks ago. Jake worked as a construction supervisor, and his hands, calloused from years of honest work, felt warm against my forehead. You don't have a fever, but Lisa, you've lost weight. I can see it in your face. I waved him off, forcing a smile. I'm fine. Just need to get through this quarterly review at the marketing firm, and then I'll rest. The truth was, I had been feeling increasingly tired. Simple tasks like climbing the stairs to our bedroom left me breathless. But as a 34-year-old woman who had always prided herself on being strong and independent, admitting weakness felt foreign. Besides, we didn't have the best insurance, and emergency room visits were expensive. Why don't you call Dr. Peterson's office? Jake suggested, referring to our family physician. Maybe they can squeeze you in today. His next opening isn't for 3 weeks. I checked yesterday. I grabbed my purse and keys from the kitchen counter. I really need to get to work. This Miller account presentation is make or break. Jake followed me to the garage, his work boots heavy on the concrete floor. Lisa, promise me if it gets worse. I promise, I interrupted, kissing his cheek. His beard smelled like the aftershave I'd bought him for his birthday. You worry too much. As I drove through the familiar streets of our suburban neighborhood, past the coffee shop where we'd had our first date and the park where Jake had proposed, I tried to ignore the sharp pain that had started in my abdomen. It came in waves, like a fist clenching and unclenching inside me. At work, my colleague Rebecca noticed my pale complexion immediately. "Girl, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, setting a stack of files on my desk. Rebecca had been my friend since college, and her directness was usually refreshing, but today it felt like another weight on my shoulders. "Just tired," I replied, turning to my computer screen. The quarterly reports blurred together as another wave of pain hit me, stronger this time. The Miller presentation went poorly. I stumbled over statistics I'd memorized, forgot key talking points, and had to excuse myself twice to use the restroom. Mr. Miller, a stern man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive suit, looked unimpressed as I wrapped up 20 minutes earlier than planned. "We'll be in touch," he said curtly, shaking hands with my boss Janet instead of me. After the clients left, Janet pulled me aside. Her office smelled like lavender and vanilla, a stark contrast to the sterile conference room we'd just left. "Lisa, I don't know what's going on with you lately, but you need to get it together. This promotion depends on your performance." I nodded, swallowing the bile that rose in my throat. "I understand. It won't happen again." The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light was a small relief, a moment where I didn't have to focus on anything but breathing through the pain. When I finally pulled into our driveway, Jake's truck was already there, unusual for a Tuesday. I found him in the kitchen, still in his work clothes but with flour on his hands. The smell of homemade bread filled the air, and despite my nausea, it was comforting. "You're home early," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Finished the Henderson job ahead of schedule." He looked up from the bread dough he was kneading. "Thought I'd surprise you with dinner. How did the presentation go?" I couldn't bring myself to tell him about the disaster at work, so I just shrugged. It went. That evening, as we sat at our small dining table with its checkered tablecloth, a wedding gift from Jake's grandmother, I picked at the chicken and vegetables he'd prepared. Each bite felt like swallowing rocks. "You barely touched your food," Jake observed, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. "My stomach's just off." I pushed the plate away. "I think I'll take a bath and go to bed early." As I soaked in the warm water, surrounded by the soft glow of candles Jake had lit for me, I tried to convince myself that tomorrow would be better. The pain in my abdomen had become a constant companion, sharp and demanding, but I told myself it was stress. It had to be stress. Jake knocked softly on the bathroom door. "Lisa," Rebecca called. She wanted to check on you. Even my friends were noticing. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. Maybe I really was sicker than I wanted to admit. "I'm okay," I called back, but my voice cracked on the words. That night, I lay awake listening to Jake's steady breathing beside me. The digital clock on his nightstand cast a green glow, 2:47 a.m. The pain was getting worse, radiating from my abdomen to my back, but I convinced myself it would pass. It had to pass. I closed my eyes and tried to focus on the sound of rain beginning to patter against our bedroom window, hoping that morning would bring relief. I had no idea that by tomorrow evening, my entire world would change forever. I woke up on the bathroom floor. The cold tiles pressed against my cheek, and for a moment, I couldn't remember how I'd gotten there. The taste of blood filled my mouth, and when I tried to sit up, the room spun violently. Through the haze, I could hear Jake calling my name, his voice growing more frantic with each repetition. "Lisa! Lisa, can you hear me?" His hands were on my shoulders, gentle but urgent. When I managed to focus on his face, I saw fear, real raw fear in his eyes. "What time is it?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "It's 6 in the morning. I found you here when I got up for work." His hands were shaking as he helped me sit up against the bathtub. "How long have you been on the floor?" I couldn't remember. The last thing I recalled was getting up to use the bathroom around 4 a.m., and then nothing. "We need to get you to the hospital," Jake said, already reaching for his phone. "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. "I just need to rest. Maybe call in sick today." "Lisa, you collapsed. You're bleeding from somewhere. Look at your mouth." He held up his phone screen so I could see my reflection. My lower lip was swollen and cut, probably from hitting the floor. I probably just got dizzy and fell. It happens. But even as I said it, I knew it sounded weak. The pain in my abdomen had intensified overnight, becoming a constant, burning presence that made it hard to think clearly. Jake sat back on his heels, running his hands through his dark hair, a gesture I'd learned to recognize as his way of processing stress. "This isn't normal and you know it. You've been sick for weeks. We can't afford an emergency room visit right now," I said quietly. "You know what happened to the Johnsons when their kid broke his arm. They're still paying off that bill. Our neighbors had been hit with a $3,000 emergency room bill the previous year, and it had taken them months to recover financially. The reality of American healthcare costs was something we couldn't ignore, even when facing a potential crisis." Jake was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him wrestling with the decision. Finally, he stood up and extended his hand to me. "Come on, let's get you back to bed, and then I'm calling Dr. Peterson's office. They'll have to see you today." Getting back to bed was harder than it should have been. My legs felt like jelly, and twice Jake had to catch me when I stumbled. Once I was lying down, he brought me water and toast, neither of which I could manage more than a few sips or bites of. While Jake made phone calls in the kitchen, I stared at the ceiling of our bedroom. We painted it together 3 years ago, a soft blue that was supposed to be calming. Now it felt like I was looking up from the bottom of a well. "Dr. Peterson's office can see you at 2 p.m., Jake announced, appearing in the doorway. "I'm taking the day off." "You can't. The Morrison Project. The Morrison Project can wait. My wife is more important than any construction job." The firmness in his voice told me there was no point in arguing. Jake had always been protective, but this was different. This was the voice of a man who was genuinely scared. The hours until the appointment crawled by. I drifted in and out of sleep, each time waking to find the pain had gotten worse. By noon, I couldn't stand up without Jake's help, and even sitting upright made me dizzy. Dr. Peterson's office was in a small medical building downtown, the kind of place that smelled like disinfectant and had magazines from 6 months ago in the waiting room. When they called my name, Jake had to help me walk to the examination room. Dr. Peterson was in his 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle manner that had always put me at ease. Today, however, his expression grew increasingly concerned as he examined me. "When did the abdominal pain start?" he asked, pressing gently on different areas of my stomach. "About 2 weeks ago," I admitted, "but it's gotten much worse in the last couple of days." He checked my blood pressure, temperature, and pulse, making notes on his tablet. "Lisa, your blood pressure is dangerously low, and your heart rate is elevated." Combined with these symptoms, he paused, looking between Jake and me. "I need you to go to the emergency room immediately." "Can't you just prescribe something?" I asked. "Maybe an antibiotic?" Dr. Peterson sat down on his rolling stool, his expression serious. "I'm concerned about several possibilities, but given your symptoms, the pain, the nausea, the fainting, and now your vital signs, this could be appendicitis or something else that requires immediate surgical intervention." The word surgical hit me like a physical blow. Jake reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "What if we wait until tomorrow?" Jake asked. "See how she feels?" Dr. Peterson shook his head firmly. "I wouldn't recommend waiting. In fact, I'm going to call ahead to St. Mary's Hospital and let them know you're coming. This isn't something to delay." The drive to St. Mary's Hospital felt surreal. Jake had called his brother Tom to come with us, and Tom sat in the back seat, trying to make light conversation to fill the silence. But I could barely focus on their words. The pain was now constant, sharp and demanding, making it impossible to find a comfortable position. The emergency room was busy for a Wednesday afternoon. Families with crying children, elderly people with worried relatives, and the general chaos of a hospital emergency department surrounded us. But when Jake gave them my name at the triage desk, we were taken back almost immediately. The triage nurse, a woman named Patricia with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, took my vital signs again. Her expression grew serious as she read the results. "Dr. Martinez will see you right away," she said, leading us to a curtained area in the main emergency department. Dr. Martinez was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 30s, with dark hair and a confident manner. She introduced herself while pulling on gloves, and I could see her mentally cataloging my symptoms as Jake explained what had been happening. "I need to examine your abdomen," she said. "This might be uncomfortable." When her hands pressed against my lower right side, the pain was so intense that I cried out, tears streaming down my face. Jake immediately moved to my side, taking my hand. Dr. Martinez stepped back, her expression grave. She looked directly at Jake, and I'll never forget the words that came next. "You should have brought her yesterday." The room seemed to stop. Jake's face went white, and I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the physical pain. "What does that mean?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your wife has acute appendicitis, and from what I can see, her appendix has likely ruptured. We need to get her into surgery immediately." The recovery room smelled like antiseptic and fear. When I first woke up after surgery, the world felt muted and distant, like I was experiencing everything through a thick fog. The breathing tube had been removed, but my throat felt raw, and when I tried to speak, only a whisper came out. Jake was there immediately, his hand warm against my forehead. His eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion, and I realized he'd been crying. "Hey," he said softly, trying to smile. "Welcome back." "How long?" I managed to ask. 8 hours. The surgery took longer than they expected." His voice cracked slightly. "Your appendix had ruptured, Lisa. It had been leaking infection into your abdomen for at least 2 days. Dr. Martinez appeared beside my bed, her surgical scrubs replaced by a white coat. Her expression was kind but serious. "The good news is that we got all the infected tissue out, and you're going to be okay. But it was close. If you'd waited another day." She didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications hung in the air between us. The bad news is that because of the perforation and the extent of the infection, your recovery is going to be longer and more complicated than a standard appendectomy. You'll need to stay in the hospital for at least a week, possibly more, while we monitor for complications. A nurse named Michael, a tall man with gentle hands and a reassuring voice, explained the various tubes and monitors connected to my body. There was an 4 for antibiotics, a drain to remove infected fluid from my abdomen, and a catheter that made me feel vulnerable and exposed. The pain medication will help, Michael said, adjusting something on the 4 pump. But you're going to feel pretty rough for the next few days. He wasn't lying. The first 3 days in the hospital were a blur of pain, nausea, and frustrated tears. I couldn't eat anything more substantial than ice chips, without vomiting. Simple tasks like sitting up or walking to the bathroom required Jake's help and left me exhausted. But it was the emotional weight that hit hardest. During the long hours when pain medication made sleep impossible but left me too foggy to think clearly, I kept replaying the past few weeks in my mind. All the signs I'd ignored, all the times Jake had begged me to see a doctor, all the moments when I'd chosen work over my health. I almost killed myself over a quarterly report, I whispered to Jake on the 3rd night. He was sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside my bed, but my voice woke him. "Don't," he said immediately, moving to sit on the edge of my bed. "Don't do that to yourself." But it's true. Dr. Martinez said if we'd waited another day, I couldn't finish the sentence. Jake took my hand, careful not to disturb the 4-line. We didn't wait. You're here, you're alive, and you're going to be okay. Because you forced me to come. I would have kept putting it off. The guilt was overwhelming, heavier than the physical pain. What kind of person prioritizes a work presentation over their own life? The kind of person who's been taught that her worth is tied to her productivity, Jake said quietly. The kind of person who lives in a country where people die because they can't afford health care. His words hit me hard because they were true. How many times had I heard stories of people ignoring serious symptoms because they couldn't afford medical bills? How many times had I done the same thing myself, pushing through illnesses that should have sent me to a doctor? On the 4th day, I developed a complication. Dr. Martinez explained it calmly, but I could see the concern in her eyes. You have what we call an abscesso, a pocket of infection that we need to drain. It's not uncommon with ruptured appendicitis, but it means we need to keep you here longer. The procedure to drain the abscess was painful and humiliating. I had to lie still while they inserted a tube through my back, guided by ultrasound to reach the infected area. Jake held my hand through the entire procedure, talking to me about anything and everything to keep my mind off what was happening. "Remember our first apartment?" he said as the doctor worked. That tiny place above the bakery where the floors creaked and the radiator sounded like a dying animal. Despite everything, I smiled. You burned dinner so many times that the smoke alarm became our dinner bell. Hey, I was learning, and you weren't much better. Remember the time you tried to make pasta and somehow set the oven mitt on fire? These memories felt precious now, like treasures I'd almost lost forever. Each shared moment, each silly argument about whose turn it was to do dishes, each morning spent drinking coffee together before work, all of it could have been taken away because I'd been too stubborn to listen to my body. Rebecca visited on the 5th day, bringing flowers and gossip from the office. She looked shocked when she saw me, though I could tell she was trying to hide it. "Oh, honey," she said, setting the flowers on the windowsill. They were sunflowers, my favorite, and they brought a splash of warmth to the sterile hospital room. "I look that bad, huh?" I attempted a joke, but Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I should have pushed harder," she said. "I knew something was wrong, but when you said you were fine, I believed you. This isn't your fault, Rebecca. It's not anyone's fault." But even as I said it, I wondered if that was true. Was it really no one's fault, Or was it a failure of a system that made healthcare so expensive that people routinely chose between their health and their financial stability? How's work? I asked, trying to change the subject. Rebecca hesitated. Janet wanted me to tell you not to worry about anything. Just focus on getting better. There was something in her tone that made me suspicious. Rebecca, what aren't you telling me? She sighed, pulling the visitor's chair closer to my bed. The Miller account went to Peterson and Associates. Janet's under pressure from corporate about the quarterly numbers. The implication was clear. My job was in jeopardy. The promotion I'd been killing myself to achieve was gone, and now my position itself might be at risk. I might not have a job to go back to, I said to Jake after Rebecca left. Then we'll figure it out, he replied without hesitation. We have some savings, and if worst comes to worst, I can pick up extra shifts or side jobs. What matters is that you're alive. But I could see the worry in his eyes, the way he calculated numbers in his head when he thought I wasn't looking. The hospital bills were already mounting, and even with insurance, we were looking at thousands of dollars in out-of-pocket expenses. That night, as I lay awake listening to the sounds of the hospital, the beeping monitors, the hushed conversations of night shift nurses, the distant sound of an ambulance arriving, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let fear of financial hardship control my health decisions anymore. I wasn't going to let work define my worth as a human being. I was going to live differently. The question was, how? 2 weeks after coming home from the hospital, I sat at our kitchen table with a stack of medical bills and a calculator, trying to make sense of numbers that seemed impossibly large. The morning sun streamed through our windows, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air, and I should have felt grateful to be alive to see it. Instead, I felt overwhelmed. $37,000, I said to Jake as he poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that I'd refused to throw away. Even after insurance, we still owe $12,000. Jake sat down across from me, his work clothes still smelling like sawdust and fresh air. He'd been leaving for job sites later and coming home earlier to take care of me, which meant less overtime pay at a time when we needed it most. We'll figure it out, he said, the same words he'd been repeating for weeks. But I could see the strain in his face, the way he rubbed his temples when he thought I wasn't looking. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Need to discuss your employment status. Can you come in Thursday? I showed Jake the message and his jaw tightened. You're not even cleared to drive yet. It was true. The infection had taken more out of me than I'd expected. Simple tasks like showering left me exhausted, and my energy levels were still nowhere near normal. Dr. Martinez had said it could take months to feel completely myself again. I can take an Uber, I said, but Jake was already shaking his head. I'll drive you. The Henderson job can wait. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood as Jake drove me to the marketing firm where I'd worked for 6 years. The building looked smaller somehow, less important than it had when I'd been desperately trying to impress Mr. Miller with quarterly reports that now seemed meaningless. Janet's office felt cold and impersonal. She'd removed the lavender and vanilla diffuser, and the space smelled like nothing at all. She gestured for me to sit in the chair across from her desk, the same chair where I'd received praise for campaigns, discussed raises, and planned my future with the company. Lisa, I want to start by saying how glad we all are that you're okay, Janet began, but her tone was formal, practiced. Your health is the most important thing. But I prompted, knowing there was more. But the reality is that the Miller account was crucial for our quarterly numbers. Without it, corporate is requiring us to make some difficult decisions. She opened a folder on her desk. We're restructuring the department, and, unfortunately, your position is being eliminated. The words hit me, but not as hard as I'd expected. Maybe because I'd seen it coming, or maybe because nearly dying puts job loss into perspective. However, Janet continued, we'd like to offer you a severance package and a positive reference. And if circumstances change in the future, she slid a packet across the desk. The severance was modest, but fair enough to help with the medical bills, though not enough to replace my salary for long. I need to think about it, I said, tucking the packet into my purse. Of course. Take your time. On the drive home, Jake was quiet until we stopped at a red light. Then, he turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. How do you feel? He asked. I considered the question seriously. Scared about the money, but also relieved? Is that terrible? No, he said immediately. It's not terrible at all. That evening, we sat on our back porch with cups of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was tending to her garden next door, and the smell of her roses drifted over on the evening breeze. I keep thinking about what Dr. Martinez said. I told Jake. You should have brought her yesterday. She wasn't just talking about the appendicitis. Jake raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to continue. She was talking about all of it. All the days I should have prioritized my health over work. All the times I should have listened to my body instead of pushing through. I pulled my sweater tighter around my shoulders. I almost died because I was afraid of taking time off work. So what do you want to do? It was such a simple question, but I realized no one had asked me that in years. What did I want to do? Not what did I need to do for the company, or for the quarterly reports, or for the promotion. What did I, Lisa, actually want? I want to start over, I said slowly. I want to find work that doesn't make me feel like I have to choose between my health and paying bills. Jake reached over and took my hand. That sounds like a good plan. Over the next few weeks, as my strength slowly returned, I began exploring options I'd never seriously considered before. I reached out to former colleagues who'd started their own consulting firms. I researched freelance opportunities that would give me more control over my schedule. I even looked into part-time positions that might offer better work-life balance, even if they paid less. Rebecca visited regularly, bringing updates from the office and helping me network with her contacts in other companies. During one visit, she mentioned something that caught my attention. You know, there's a nonprofit downtown that helps people navigate medical billing and insurance issues, she said. They're looking for someone with business experience to help develop educational materials. The idea intrigued me. After weeks of wrestling with my own medical bills, I'd learned more about healthcare costs and insurance than I'd ever wanted to know. But I'd also realized how many people were in similar situations, struggling to understand complex billing systems while dealing with serious health issues. I applied for the position, not sure if they'd be interested in someone with my background. The interview was at a small office in downtown Denver, in a building that looked nothing like the sleek marketing firm where I'd spent so many years. The director, a woman named Carol with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes, listened as I explained my recent experience. It sounds like you understand our clients' situations from personal experience, she said. That's valuable. But why do you want to work in nonprofit? The pay is significantly less than what you made in marketing. Because I almost died trying to earn that salary, I said honestly. And I realized that no amount of money is worth sacrificing your health or your relationships for a job that doesn't align with your values. Carol smiled. When can you start? 3 months after my surgery, I began working at the Mile High Healthcare Advocacy Center. The work was challenging in entirely different ways than marketing had been. Instead of trying to convince people to buy products they might not need, I was helping them understand medical bills they couldn't afford and navigate insurance systems that seemed designed to confuse rather than help. My first client was a woman named Jennifer, whose daughter had been hospitalized for pneumonia. Jennifer worked 2 part-time jobs, neither of which offered health insurance, and she was facing a $15,000 hospital bill that she had no way to pay. I kept telling myself it was just a cold, Jennifer said, tears in her eyes as we sat in my small office. I gave her over-the-counter medicine and hoped it would get better. By the time I took her to the emergency room, she was barely breathing. Her story felt achingly familiar. Another mother, another person who delayed seeking medical care because of cost, another family facing financial ruin because someone got sick in America. But unlike my marketing job, where success was measured in campaign metrics and quarterly profits, here I could make a tangible difference in people's lives. I helped Jennifer apply for financial assistance programs, negotiated with the hospital's billing department, and set up a payment plan she could actually afford. 6 months later, Jennifer sent me a photo of her daughter playing soccer, healthy and smiling. "Thank you for helping us when we didn't know where to turn," she wrote. At home, Jake and I had settled into new routines. He still worked construction, but he'd turned down several high-paying jobs that would have required extensive travel or long hours. We'd agreed that being present for each other was more important than maximizing income. We were paying off the medical bills slowly but steadily. It would take time, but we were managing. More importantly, I was sleeping better than I had in years, no longer waking up in the middle of the night worried about quarterly reports or client presentations. One evening, as we prepared dinner together in our small kitchen, Jake asked me something that had been on his mind. "Do you ever regret it? Taking the nonprofit job instead of looking for another marketing position?" I thought about it as I chopped vegetables for our salad. Did I miss the higher salary? Sometimes. Did I miss the prestige of working for a well-known firm? Occasionally. But did I regret the change? No, I said firmly. I spent years climbing a ladder that was leaning against the wrong building. Now I'm finally doing work that matters to me. Jake smiled and kissed my forehead. "I'm proud of you." That night, as I lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of our neighborhood, the distant hum of traffic, the gentle whisper of wind through the trees, Jake's steady breathing beside me, I thought about Dr. Martinez's words. "You should have brought her yesterday." She was right, of course. We should have sought help sooner. But in a larger sense, I should have been taking better care of myself all along. I should have been listening to my body, prioritizing my health, and recognizing that my worth as a person wasn't determined by my productivity at work. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, through pain and fear and the very real possibility of losing everything that mattered. But I'd learned it, and now, every day I woke up was a gift, not because I'd survived a medical crisis, but because I'd finally figured out how to really live. The scar from my surgery had faded to a thin white line, barely visible unless you knew where to look. But the lessons I'd learned were permanent fixtures in my life now, guiding every decision I made about work, health, and what truly mattered. I was finally living like someone who understood that tomorrow was never guaranteed, and that the most important things in life, health, love, purpose couldn't be bought with overtime pay or quarterly bonuses. As I drifted off to sleep, I made a mental note to schedule my annual physical exam. This time, I wouldn't wait for symptoms to force my hand. This time, I would take care of myself the way I deserved to be taken care of. Because I'd learned almost too late that some things are too precious to gamble with, and my life was definitely one of them.